Hello, glorious scrappers. Here we are. This is Kate. And what you're looking at is my layout that I'll be doing with you today. It's a 2-page spread. And the sample was actually made out of it was a Creative Memories bundle where if you spent a certain amount, you could choose from different packages. And this one had penguins in it. I thought it was so cute that I decided I needed to make a penguin and an igloo to go with it too. So that's what we're going to be making. And I did send out a supply list, but if you guys are not sure what you need, please, I'm going to try to keep an eye on the comments. I usually don't do a very good job at that though, so shoot me a message if you need to. All right, so instead of using the penguin paper for tonight, I'm going to change it up a little. And I'm going to use the good old tried and true Polar Lights collection. I think this one is now actually sold out on the Creative Memories website. But if you have it, here's a thing you can do. Now, as you can see, I did actually use this to make layouts previously, so I only have a partial page that I'm going to use for my background. But that's totally okay because we're going to be covering it with a border on this side anyway, so I'll be able to fill in this space for that. So this is what I'm going to use for my background page. I want it to be relatively subtle because I'm going to be adding other things on top of it. But we are going to start with our white shimmer paper. And I hope you guys can see me. One thing I don't like about the Facebook Live is that if you're using your phone as your camera, you can't turn it horizontally. So even though that makes more sense for what we're doing, I have to keep it vertical. So it's higher, which means that your view is a little smaller. So feel free to hop onto your computer instead of your phone if you need to check it out better. And also I do have a full PDF for this layout, which I will be able to provide after I do the instruction. But we're going to start by taking I put this upside down. Let me put it so I can read it. I'm going to start by taking the white shimmer paper and I'm going to line it up at the 2.5 inch mark and go across that line there. And then this is the largest circle. I call it circle number 3, 1 being the smallest and 3 being the largest. And it makes a 6-inch circle or a 3.5 inch circle. Those are the markings that are actually molded into the plastic in case you want to make sure you have the right one. And then what we're going to do with this template is we are going to line this up on, remember we have our paper at the 2.5 inch mark. So we're going to line up the template so that the edge of it is at about the 1 inch mark. And then the bottom of it is going to be also right here at approximately the 1 inch mark. So that's going to be your litmus test for making sure that you're cutting the right size. And then we're going to use the green blade and we're going to cut from end to end. I like to always start making my cut at 10 o'clock though. So I'm going to cut at 10 o'clock and go around. And then I'm going to realign my blade. Easier said than done. And I'm going to come back around and finish my cut on the other side. The problem with trying to come on from an edge is that a lot of times you'll crinkle up the paper, it'll bend it, and then you won't get a good clean cut. So this is the first piece, and we'll set that aside for now. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get out the number 3 oval. So this one is molded into the plastic as a 4x6. It's the there are 4 ovals as opposed to only 3 circles. And if you're counting up, this will be the 3rd one from the smallest. There's one more that's larger, so that's why I call it number 3. I'm actually going to flip this paper over so that I can align it again at the 2.5 mark for the bottom edge. A little cockeyed there. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to line up the template, and this time I'm going to put it over here to make sure that I have enough room about at the 1/2 inch mark. And then the template itself, I want the plastic to end right across the bottom line where the marks are. All right, and then I'm just gonna turn this a little to make sure that it's as vertical as possible. And for this one, I'm gonna use the red blade, and I'm gonna do the same basic idea, cut from edge to edge, but I'm actually gonna do it by making 2 separate cuts. It's easy to cut off the edge, but not quite as easy to start by coming up onto the edge. So that way I cut off on both sides, and I have nice clean cuts. So the pieces that I end up with look like this, okay? So that's the first step. And then the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get out, remember this guy? This is a nice OG one. This is the 8x10 oval, and way back in the day, probably circa 1999 or 2000, this was actually a hostess gift, so you couldn't even buy it from the catalog. You had to earn it. And I've had it in my kit ever since, but we don't have anything else that's comparable for this size, so this is the one that I pull out again and again. If you don't have this template, that doesn't mean you can't make the layout. What you want to do is go get a dinner plate or something like that that has, maybe even a platter that has a nice big circumference. And what we're actually going to do with this is we're going to cut off the bottom of the igloo to make sure that we have a nice shape for that. So I just put this on I put the outer curve on the 1 inch mark and let it come over and go across the 2 inch line here. And I'm just gonna position my template. I'm gonna use the red blade to cut this. And I'm just gonna do my very best eyeball job at making sure that the size and shape of the wings over here is roughly equal. It doesn't really matter right in the center if you accidentally cut off the edge, so don't worry too much about that because that part is actually going to be covered up later. So this time, because I'm going horizontally, I'm going to take a chance on coming in from the edge and then cutting over to the other edge. And there we go. All right, so as you can see, I did in fact cut off the edge a little bit, but the front piece of the igloo is actually going to cover that up, so it's going to be just fine. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to still use this template, which is why if you use a plate or a platter, it's going to stand in good stead for you because you'll be able to continue to use that for the shape. Because what we want to do now is get our gray or silver pen, and we want to lay the template back across here. And then you can see there's 2 different tips. One is a writing tip and one is actually a brush tip. We're going to use this brush tip, which makes a little wider line. But what we're going to do is just draw lines in that same shape across the igloo. And this is how we're going to start creating the bricks of the igloo, okay? So they're spaced about every I would say scant inch between them. And I'm just going to add one more here. Okay. There we go. So you can see what that looks like. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my ruler. I actually think I'm going to add one more at the very top just so it doesn't look like such a wide, empty space. There we go. Okay. So now I'm going to center this so that the 6 inch line on the cutting mat goes right through the center. And then what we're going to do is line our ruler up against that. And we're going to use that to make the center line here. But we're not just gonna go down the middle. We're actually gonna start creating those bricks. So we're gonna go every other space. So if we go from here to here, and then here, whoops, and then here, okay. Now from the center point, if we come over about an inch, that's a good starting place for the top, but because it's a round shape, we want to give it that view. So down here, I'm going to go to, I think I'm going to take it all the way out to, so this is 1 inch over. This would be 1.5 inch over. You can see I'm at the 1/2 inch line. And I'm going to make this line in the opposite segments of where we already drew our center line, okay? So you start to see where the bricks are. Then I'm going to come over again, 1 inch, and then I'm going to swing this out again, a little further than 1.5 this time, just to make sure that we have everything accounted for. And I'm just going to tilt it back up to where it touches the line here so that it makes sense for it to be there, right? And again, we're going with every other one. So then you'll have your igloo bricks. And then I'm going to duplicate that same process on the other side. So starting at about 1 inch apart. You didn't know you were getting an art lesson tonight, did you? It's a different kind of art, I guess. And then again, make sure that you're always keeping with whatever the last row is that you did. Make sure you're doing the opposite row this time so that, here, this is when I get into trouble when I try to talk and draw at the same time. You want to make sure you're always going to the opposite one so you are creating that brick pattern, okay? So there's the base to your igloo. We'll go ahead and set that aside and just give it a good chance for the pen marks to really dry because sometimes on the shimmer paper, inks and things like that take a little bit longer. All right, so now I'm going to bring this guy back over and I'm going to center him. It doesn't really matter what line you put it on. I'm putting it on the 4 inch line just for the sake of picking a spot and lining it up. But I do want it centered between two of the lines here. And again, I'm just using that eyeball method of looking at how much wing space I have, and when I'm happy with about where that's located, then I know I'm good to go. And then I'm going to line up the cutting system pattern again. And it goes, as you can see, just about to the corners, just shy of the corners over here. And this time what I'm going to do, I'm going to still be using that fat part of the marker, but I'm going to draw the line on the inside track, and that's going to make the door for the entrance into the igloo, okay? So from that point, I'm going to go ahead and take the ruler again, and I'm actually going to move this over a little so it's centered on the mat because I'm going to use that center line again down the 6 inch mark on the mat. And that way I know it's centered to start. And once again, because it's a round shape, we have to take that into account, but when you're looking at the dead center, you can start with a straight line. So from that point, I'm going to, I think I'm actually going to go, so I go from this corner over to, which line is this? This is, well, if you look at the 3 lines on your mat there, I'm going to go from the corner to the last one of the stack from the top, like that. No, I don't really like that though. I don't love it. I'm going to still go from this mark over here, but instead I'm going to bring this parallel with the mark down here. And then I'm going to make my line here. And that way I should have the ability to pretty much duplicate that line by going to this side and lining it up, lining my ruler up with this side, so that I get the mark that I want over here. Like that. A little bit further. And this is not rocket science. Nobody's going to judge you on what a good job you did with the lines. And then the last one I'm going to do is I'm just going to line the ruler up straight with one of the marks on the side. And I'm just going to give the last brick line there. So this is kind of like your wedged blocks that are going to create the entrance for your igloo. Okay, so from that point, I'm going to also get out my scrap of gray. Remember we talked about a scrap, but what you want is enough on the side to do a couple of border punches. So I'm actually going to flip this over and use the back side over here so I still maintain my space, my 12 inches over here. And then I'm going to take the inside track on this oval again, and I'm going to cut it with the red blade. And I believe this color cardstock was called dark charcoal. The one that's available now is cool gray. I think it's slightly lighter than this. Whichever one you have, that's going to be fine. It's going to work just fine. Okay, so there we go. All right, so I didn't quite cut through in one spot. I'm just going to make sure that's tucked under so it doesn't really show. And then this is going to be adhered right in between the lines that you drew for with the marker. So we're going to tuck it right on there, and then we'll just trim off the excess. So let me go ahead and get my adhesive so I can do that now. Okay, and then we'll get the trimmer out. Now I'm not always successful at trimming close when I want to trim something off like this, so I'm actually going to use the little guide here that pops out on the Creative Memories trimmer, and I'm going to make sure that I'm aligned with that, because that is going to be my true north in terms of where the blade is actually going to make the cut. And I honestly would rather trim off a little tiny bit of the igloo than to trim off not enough of the gray, if that makes sense. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and make my trim there. All right, see? Ta-da! Nice success story. That's a really good thing to use, that guide. Okay, so this is going to be the front of the igloo when we put the layout together, okay? And it's going to dip down in the front like that. Now, in the sample, I did put one of the penguin stickers, and with the using a different paper collection and not having the same stickers, I do still have some penguin options for polar lights. This one, I don't know, I kind of like that. I think that's cute. I might do that. Or I might just do the penguin by himself. He's a little bit smaller, but I think we lose something in the translation. I'm going to think about that until I'm ready to actually adhere it to the layout. So we'll set that aside and we'll still think on that. Okay, going to put the cutting system pieces away. And then the next thing I'm going to go to is the border punch. So I'm still using the penguins for this. I really love them. I think they're great. And what I want to do here is I want to punch 2 gray out of the cardstock. So I'll get that out again. And then in case you're not familiar with the Creative Memories punches, there are black lines on the front of the punch where you can actually align your paper when you put it in the punch. If you line it up with that black line, then you know you're going to be in the perfect position to get your 12-inch mark or your 12-inch cut, a nice balanced cut. So we'll start making that punch. And then the way you go through it is there's a little triangle shape that punches on the scrap, and that you're going to line up with the little triangular divot that is on the punch. So you'll be able to line up the shape exactly and always be in the right place. That's really helpful with a repetitive cut that looks like it's the same, especially, for example, the train tracks. If you don't line them up quite right, you could end up without your middle rail in one spot. So you want to make sure that you are using that triangular cutout to keep you on track. Okay. There we go. All right, that's one 12-inch length. This is not a chain punch. It's a true border punch. So the penguins punch out, but they don't release from the paper. So our next trick is going to be to actually trim them off. And what we want to do for that is we want to, right here, if you're using the penguin punch, right at the end, you want that piece near the penguin feet to be up against the 1 centimeter line for the gray cardstock. So I'm going to cut that off there. And then I'm going to use the scrap, the same scrap, to go in and punch a second round. And hopefully, because I'm doing this in real time, it will let everybody stay caught up with me. But like I said, the recording will stay on Margie's page for 30 days. I'm then going to convert it also to my YouTube, so I will be able to post a link for that for you. And then I'm also going to send out the PDF to the group, so you'll have it. And it's long. It's a 27-page PDF, which is going to give you the opportunity to make sure that you are able to get every single screenshot of what I did, so that you'll be able to duplicate this in case you either couldn't keep up or you're out partying and celebrating and you didn't get to watch the whole thing. Okay, so again, I'm going to line the edge up at the 1 centimeter. There we go. And I'm just going to trim that off. This is going to be the under layer, like the shadow of the border. So I'm not too worried about perfection at this particular part of the game. All right, and then we're going to punch 2 of the dark blue shimmer in the penguins as well. And shimmer paper is a little thinner than cardstock, so as you can see, I got a little bit stuck there because one of the wing pieces got in the way, but that's okay because it didn't rip, so I can still use the punch. When that does happen, you want to try to move it gently, kind of wiggle it around gently and see if you can coax it to come out so that you don't have to abandon your cut. But naturally, because everyone's looking at me, that's the reason I made the mistake, right? It's Murphy. He's here, even on New Year's Eve. All right, now, I'm going to go ahead. Now, if I do that, I'm going to have a wonky edge. I'm going to change the blade in my trimmer to one of the decorative edges, and I actually really like the scallop for this. But keep in mind that the scallop is directional. So we want to take a look at that when we put it in. And we want to make sure that the scallop is facing to the outside of where I'm making my cut. So I'm actually going to put it in to the blade housing right here. I'm going to put it with the information on it pointing to the left. And that should get me the cut where I want it to be. But I am going to just take a quick little cut of my scrap to be sure. Yep, that's the direction that I want it to be pointing. So, so put your printed information on that trimmer blade so it's pointing to the left. And then you're going to actually this time line up the footing for the penguin right at the edge of the gray cutting mat. So it's a little bit shorter than the gray. and then go ahead and make your cut. And guess what? I went the wrong way anyway. Well, live and learn. So you've got your scallop cut there, and then I'm going to go ahead and switch back to the straight blade for a second and trim a flat edge for me to punch off of. And then I'm going to cut the second penguin border, and I'm going to do the scallop the same way. But if you haven't cut it yet, you can actually face it to the right, and then it will look like the one on my sample. Okay, so let's cut one more border. Seems to be the first punch that is tricky for the penguin here. So we dodged the bullet again on that one, and we came out clean. But I want to make sure that I'm lined up well. I did lose my triangle, but it was over the center penguin, so knowing that, I can line up my shape and keep going that way. And of course, you just want to mirror your punched shape over the silver and blue design of that Creative Memories has put on the side wing of the punch. And as long as you do that, even if you punch over the same section accidentally twice, it's going to duplicate exactly what you already did, so it's going to be okay. And then one more. There we go. I was a little off, but as you can see, the spacing of it came out exactly the way it's supposed to, so it's all good. All right, so let me get my trimmer back up here. And I did put the decorative blade back in, and again, to keep it consistent, my writing is pointing to the left. But if you haven't done it yet, you can point it to your right so that your scallop is going the right direction for the penguin. It doesn't really matter. I was just trying to make it look like little mounds of snow. Now, I will tell you this, and yes, this is definitely the voice of experience. Change back to your straight trimmer blade right away. Because you're going to forget in a couple minutes that you did that, and then you're going to go to cut something and you're going to get a rude surprise. And it always happens, especially when you're almost out of paper. So that way you're preserving. And I did also cut off the scalloped edge so that I'm ready to cut whatever the next thing is that I'm making out of that dark blue shimmer. Okay. So next we're going to go to shadowing these guys together. And here, let me get my layout again, because you can see what I did here was I actually have the penguins facing each other into the center of the layout. Because anytime you have, and this is true for your photos too, if the action in your photos is looking off the page, if you put it over on this side and they're looking off the page, it makes the viewer just want to turn the page quickly. But if you put it on this side where they're looking into the center of the page, that's a better configuration for making sure that somebody's eye goes all the way around the page before they're compelled to change the page. So it's a subtle little trick that you play with people's minds. But we're going to set it up so that these penguins do face each other. And on the left side of the page, on the left side of my page, my penguin that I made, oops, here we go, is actually covering up part of this border. So where I had a little blip in my scrap paper here, I'm just going to cut this guy off at the end because it won't matter. I'll still have plenty of room. So I'm just going to give him a little shave and a haircut, and he can go off and do his own thing. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to, and now my kitchen light is going to be a strobe light, so you get special effects tonight too. All right, that's good. And then for this side, I'm going to skew the dark blue penguin a little to the right so that the gray cardstock creates a shadow. I'm hoping you can see that. You can definitely see it. If you use the lighter paper, you'll have even more, a little more of that effect. But even if you use this dark paper, you're going to be able to see it no problem in your own lighting. But welcome to winter on the East Coast, right? All right, so I'm actually going to use some repositionable adhesive to put this on. And I even brought my silicone mat, but I still did it on my cutting mat anyway. If you do get any adhesive on there, you could just roll it right off. It's pretty easy to keep the mat clean that way. All right, so I'm tilting these penguins slightly to the right of their compatriots underneath. And I'm making sure that I like the spacing for where the scallop falls as well. And you can always adjust this a little bit if you need to. But there we go. This will give us our shadowed effect. And I actually don't put any adhesive on the penguins themselves, because by the time you attach it to your page and your page protector's over the top, it's not going to snag on anything. And that way you won't have to spend so much time getting the adhesive not to show. So that's going to be the border for the left page. Now I'm going to do the right page. So I'm flipping both borders over, the gray and the blue. And this time, what I'm going to do is skew my blue penguins to the... Well, you could do it two ways, actually. If you want it to be a true reflection of the other side, you can skew it to the left. Or if you want it to look like a true shadow, you would still skew it to the right so that it would look like your light source is coming from here. But I'm actually going to change the direction of it. So this time I'm skewing my penguins a little bit to the left instead of to the right. Okay. And this time I got a little more adhesive on the mat, so let me just wipe that off so I don't have stuff sticking to it while I'm trying to work with it. And again, if you have your silicone mat, you could make so that didn't happen, but I couldn't be bothered to open it up, so there you go. All right, so these guys are going to go slightly to the right this time. I'm still making sure that I use the spacing of the scallop across the bottom to, that's where you want to make sure that you have your distance set up right so that it doesn't look odd. Okay, so now my borders are ready to go, and I'm going to actually just move them up here while I continue to do the next part of the layout. All right, now comes the fun part where we get to make the penguins. So we're going to go back to the piece of dark blue shimmer that we had left. I just have to find where I put it down. Hold that thought. What did I do with it? Maybe it got caught up in my layout? Oh, it's on the floor, naturally. Okay. I was like, wow, how did that happen anyway? All right, so I'm going to orient my paper to the bottom corner of the cutting mat for the left side and the bottom. And then I'm going to place my small heart. This is from the Gemstones custom cutting pack, and this one has the Easter egg in it. The bigger heart has the octagon in it, so you definitely want to make sure you have the smaller one. And I'm going to line this up so that the point of the heart is making an invisible line to the 3.5 inch mark, so about there. And then I want the top of the heart at about the 5.5 inch mark. So I need to slide it down this way. And this is not perfect. You do not need to get out your ruler and draw a line. You're just making a visual inspection to make sure that you have enough room to execute the rest of the project. Then you need your red blade. And what you want to look at now is where you think the widest part of the heart is. I think it's right about here. So I'm going to put my blade in and I'm going to start my cut at that wide part. And then I'm going to cut across. And then I'm going to stop my blade at what seems like the wide part on the other side. Okay. If you're not exactly correct, don't worry about it. Your penguin is still going to come out absolutely adorable. We're just going to give it a little bit more. Okay. All right, so what you have now is this flap here where your cut is, okay? Now, what you're going to do next, in case you didn't already know it, I live and die by eyeballing things, so that's how a lot of this is made. We are going to use that little plastic guide, though, on the CM trimmer again, and we're going to line up that trimmer so that it lines up exactly with where the custom cutting blade stopped cutting. And this is where I wish I had like a second phone, because I would turn my spotlight on it so you could see, but it does line up exactly. So I know I'm in the right place. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look to see, that looks like it's right about there. I'm going to just make a straight cut down. Yep, that looks pretty good. So if you can see what you have here, it's just coming straight down from that curved cut and continuing down. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, and I'm going to make sure I use that guide. See, that's a little too far to the outside. So let me center up my paper again, get that exactly where I want it. And then I'm going to make the cut again. There we go. Okay, so what you have is this part right here. Now, I know it looks like this is the part you want, but this is actually the part that is not going to get used. That's a scrap. So this is what's going to become your penguin right here. And I'm going to go back to, oh, you know what? I need my other circle. Circle number 2. This is the medium-sized circle. And what you're going to do is you're going to position it over what is going to become the penguin's face, so that the cutting track is about on this space where the inside cut was made, okay? Again, in the PDF, you're going to be able to see this maybe a little bit more clearly in case you can't see it well from this lighting. But then you're going to just look roughly to make sure that it really truly does look centered. And then again, we're going to go to the red blade and we are going to put it in the outside track, and we're going to start cutting pretty much where you started cutting last time for the widest part of the heart. Roughly that same spot is where we're going to cut around the top here. Okay. And then take that part away, and we're going to make a line, a little line from that spot. Okay. Out. And you know what? I didn't quite leave myself enough room because it should be about 1.5 inches, but instead I'm just going to take it to the corner, and then I'll match my angle on the other side. And I'm actually going to use, because I did forget to bring my pencil, I'm going to actually use this marker to make my line. And it doesn't matter because we'll flip the whole thing over to actually decorate the page with it. So let me go ahead and do that. And that, instead of 1.5 inches, it actually looks closer to 1 inch, but I do want to duplicate that same positioning so that it's symmetrical on both sides, because Mother Nature does a better job of measuring than I do. Okay, so we'll put our line on there. don't think that's even. Looks like that's the edge, yeah. Okay, so it should actually be out to here. There we go. That should make a more even cut for us. And then what I'm going to do is put the whole thing back in the trimmer. And I'm going to cut on that straight line, just the straight line part of it, so that it goes up to meet the other cut. So again, I'm going to use my new best friend here, the little guide for where the blade is, and I'm going to make sure that I like where that lines up. See, I don't have it quite lined up with the other cut part, so I want to make sure that that's where I want it to be. Okay, so now I can make that cut, and then hang on, hold that thought. I need to grab my scissors. Okay. And then I'm just gonna finesse this cut a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. So again, I'm going to use the little cutting guide to make sure that I can line it up exactly where I want it for the cut. And it's kind of more important to line it up at the top so that you're cutting from the right place than it is to line it up at the bottom. There we go. Okay. So I'll turn this over so the lines don't confuse you. And there is the main construction of the penguin. Okay, it's obviously going to be shorter. We're going to make that decision a little bit later on of where we cut that part off. And now let's go back to our white shimmer paper. And we're going to get a scrap here from the white shimmer paper to make what we need for lining the penguin body. Now I know that I'm going to need a strip of 4 by 12 of this shimmer paper for my side border, so I'm going to cut that off now. And then I'm going to see how I want to line this up. I know I'm making him shorter, so don't panic. What we're going to do is adhere the penguin to the white cardstock scrap here. If you guys don't scrap with me on a regular basis, then you may not know that my thing is I spent a lot of money on the tools, so I want to get the most out of my tools that I possibly can. So I spend a lot of time figuring out what I can make with the Creative Memories tools that I have so that I feel like I'm getting the most bang for my buck. And one of those things is the cutting system. It is just such a wonderful multi-purpose tool. There, that's a little straighter. And the possibilities are endless. You can do so many things with it. All right, so I'm going to trim off this piece here, and then I'm going to fussy cut around the edge of the penguin. I may need to go back just because I'm going so fast. I may need to go back and trim him up a little more if it shows too much once I place it on the layout, but I seem to be cutting close enough that I think I'll be okay. All right, so there's a little bit of white showing at the top. I'm just gonna peel back the top layer a little bit. Maybe. And then I will trim that up. There we go. Oh, good. My cat has decided that now is a great time to wake up from her nap and come investigate what I'm doing. So hopefully she won't jump up here and try to help too much. All right, so there's the basic shape of the penguin. Let's go ahead and give him a little trim to cut him down to size so that you know what you're looking at. There we go. Okay. Because sometimes when you have that excess on there, it looks like you've made some kind of mistake, which actually isn't the case. We just needed to clean up edges a little bit. Let me get rid of some of this trash here. Whoops. Don't throw away the ruler. You need that. Okay. So now let's have some fun. Let's give him a cute little face. That's the best part, right? I'm going to get out first my scrap of orange cardstock and the banner punch. I know I added this at the last minute. That was an oversight on my part, but we're definitely going to fix that now. And so what we're going to do, we want to be looking at the bottom side of it. See how the bottom opening is in here? You're going to stick your scrap of orange cardstock in there so that you can see just the little beak shaped triangle, and you're just going to snip that off. And that's it. That's all we need the orange cardstock and the banner punch for. If you don't own the banner punch, that's fine. You can just cut a corner off a piece of a square of some orange cardstock, and then you're going to have his face. Okay, or his nose anyway. The next thing we're going to do is take the scrap of black cardstock, and this is a bigger piece than I need, but this is what I have, so. And again, you're going to look at the bottom instead of the top. This is the Border Maker housing and a Border Maker cartridge, but we are not going to use it with the actual side piece that is the Border Maker system. We're just going to use it like a punch, and this housing makes it so that we can punch. What we're going to do is we're going to just push the cardstock in until it stops, and then make one punch. Okay? And what you actually need is the poop punch. No, the punch poop. Oh my goodness. You need 2 of the 3 circles that it punched out, and those are going to be our penguin eyes. Okay? So what I did with mine was I lined them up so they were about in the center of the heart, the top of the heart part. Oops. Like that. So they're fairly wide set. And then I made his nose so that, or his beak, so that it comes up fairly high. All right. And I like that positioning. I'm good with that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my glue pen and my reverse tweezers to adhere that. This goes back to my card making and old days. I like to use the glue pen because I feel like it gives me a little more control, and it gives me some time to reposition something like this that's a little bit fussier. And I want to put his beak, I'm going to eyeball it here, but I want to put it about in the middle of his face. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the eyeballs. And let's get those lined up so they look about even. The other thing about using the reverse tweezers and the glue pen is that for somebody with fingernails, it makes it a little easier to really control what you're doing. So if that's a consideration, that's a great way to go too. Okay, so there's the penguin's face. Now, here comes the really fun part. I'm gonna take this piece of cardstock, which has the part that I punched, right? I'm gonna center that the center circle over, well, first let me make sure he's level with the line on my cutting mat. And then I'm gonna center the circle that's in the center of this punch over his beak. And then I'm gonna know where I want to put his cheeks. And with that, I'm going to take the red ink that came with the Christmas set and sold out in a red hot second. And I'm just going to put a little ink on it. And then I think I will use my, well, let's see. Did I put some white cardstock scraps in here? Yes. So with my scrap, I'm just going to run off some of that ink. Make sure it's not too heavy. I want a real pale coating. And then I'm going to use this like a template to make his little cheeks. And you kind of want to be patient with this part and build up your layer instead of getting it too heavy for what you want in the beginning, because you can add more, but it's pretty hard to take it away. And after all this work, you don't want to do that. I did take away a little too much, so I'm just going to go back to the well on that one. You're not having a stroke, I promise. It's my kitchen light. It's deciding to strobe for New Year's, I guess. Okay, so then you have cute little cheeks for your penguin. Isn't he adorable? I love his face. He's so cute. All right, so now we have the components of the embellishments all set up for creating the layout. Let's go ahead and start constructing that. So the next thing we want to do, oh, you know what we forgot? We forgot the white gel pen. Let's go back to that. I did not spend a lot of time warming up my gel pen. I do like to do this on a dark piece of paper and just make sure, because you can see what happens with it. When it's been sitting for a little while, it takes a while to get going. There we go, it's starting to come now. So I'm willing to sacrifice a little cardstock to get that to happen. And then what I'm gonna do is kind of up to the side, I'm gonna put a dot for the pupil, right? And then I'm gonna put an even tinier dot right above that to the right. That's what they call a catch light. And if you ever see a picture of yourself that's taken by a professional photographer, you will see that catch light, which is like a second reflection in your eye. But it makes this guy look a little bit more humanistic, which makes him more appealing to us, to the human brain. All right, so let's go to layout construction now. We're gonna go back to our backing pages, which you can make with cardstock. You can make it with pattern paper from a different kit if you want to. You can make it from, you know, one of the general tonal papers if you don't have a print that you want to use. This is a snowflake print here. It's subtle enough. I'm just going to hold it up a little to see if you can see that. This is a nice tonal print, which is going to give us the hint of snowflakes without it becoming overwhelming, okay? And so those are going to be my backing pages. The next thing I want to do is, we already cut that 4 by 12 inch strip, remember, and we saved it from before. And now I'm going to take one of my scraps, and on this side, I want to get my trimmer out again, and I'm going to put another decorative blade in. And I think I'm going to use one of the new ones. I used the scallop for before, but I think I'm going to use the new one. It's called Twist. It really doesn't matter whether the print is to the left or the right for this because it's a little bit more irregular pattern and it's not directional. So I want to cut this at about 4 3/8, and that I know it's a little bit of an odd measurement, but on the CM trimmer, it does give you that measurement. I just want to make sure that there is enough paper so that when I put my white shimmer on top of it, I do get that pop of color from that. And then I'm just going to center. Actually, I think what I did for the sample is I put it up against the left side here. So let's do that again. All right, and then you get the border of the pop of the blue snowflake. Isn't that funny? This paper is the same on both sides, but for some reason it's a scrapbooker's nature to turn it over to put the adhesive on it. It's a funny thing we do. All right, so this is going to butt right up against the left edge there to make this border, and then we will go ahead and adhere that right onto the backing sheet, the base page. Okay. There we go. Okay. Now we're going to add the piece of paper to this side, and it is also going to go on the left-hand side, so it's really more towards the center. Look at how cute this paper is from the Polar Lights collection that actually has polar bears and igloos on it. So it ties right in as well. And this piece we are going to cut at 5 7/8. So again, sorry about that. It's not quite 6. There we go. And again, with the same decorative blade, I'm going to go ahead and cut that. If you don't have decorative blades for your trimmer, it's a very easy thing to use a tearing tool, or just tear the paper yourself if you want to, for the same kind of edge detail that the decorative blade would give you. Now, since I did not put my adhesive all the way to the edge because I knew I didn't have a full 12-inch piece of paper, there's no reason you need to do that. That was just to make sure I didn't stick the whole thing to my mat. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the guidance of my 13-inch cutting mat to make sure I'm creating a 12 by 12 page. Okay, so there we go. The two sides of the base layout are done. Let's go ahead and adhere our penguin borders, which we put up here. Okay. And there we go. So the one on the right is going to be on top all the way across. So I'm going to put that one on first. And I don't want to get adhesive all over my actual designer paper that I'm using for the layout, so I'm just doing it off to the side. Okay. And it's going to get adhered directly to the bottom edge of the paper. There we go. So we have that. And then this side, although I'm going to adhere the whole thing to the side of the paper, one end of it's going to get tucked underneath that border. Okay, so it's going to go directly up, butting up against the bottom edge of the paper again. But this time I'm just going to lift up my border a little bit and tuck the penguins underneath. You could also cut them off, but you know, I don't feel compelled to. I don't feel like I really need to do that. And now that that part's done, I can go ahead and adhere my penguin over here. And the way I did this in the sample is I just brought the corner of my penguin right to the corner of my layout and adhered it from there. So I'm going to do that part now. go. Okay, and then that leaves you all set for the 12-inch borders and the mats. Now I'm gonna go ahead and move to the igloo over here. I know that I want clearance for it with the front door included. So I'm gonna slide it up just a little bit here. And ever so slightly, it does go over the edge of the border. That's fine. You could tuck it under if you want to, or you can leave it on top. I'm actually gonna leave it where it is. I don't have any problem with it. I'm not worried about it being in the way for the photo mats or anything, so I'm just gonna leave it as is. And then on my sample, I did use some foam dots, the 3D adhesive to put this on. But I think I'm just gonna tack it on here with my repositionable tonight. I'm trying to, as much as I love dimensional adhesive, I'm trying to reduce my footprint a little so I can get more pages in my albums, because the last few albums that I have made have been very chunky, let's just say. All right, so there's that. And now it's time for the rubber to meet the road here on what I decide to do with this penguin. I really think I like that one. That's the winner. These are the cardstock embellishments, not stickers, so you do have to apply adhesive to these. And although I say I'm trying not to use as much dimensional adhesive, what do you bet I go back and add some dimensional adhesive to them, so it looks like they're standing in front of the igloo. All right, so now we have the matter of the stickers, the 12-inch stickers that I used up here. And I think what I'm going to do with them, because I don't have the sticker pack, is I pulled out one of the Border Maker cartridges with the snowflakes on it. And instead of using a 12-inch sticker here, I am going to go ahead and use the BMC, or the Border Maker system, to punch a couple of 12-inch snowflake strips to use for my border. So let's go ahead and do that. And if you haven't used the Border Maker system before, I know when I turned it upside down and used it like this didn't really help you figure out how it works. There's a paper guide built into this system, so you fold it out, and that's how you're going to know where to place the edge of your paper. I'm using a full 12-inch piece, but it's not a full 12 by 12, so that's not going to be a problem. It'll go right in there. And you butt it up against the end of your paper tray. And this is magnetic, so once you snap that down, your paper isn't going to move, and you can fold that plastic piece out of the way. And then the teeth will fit into the notches of the Border Maker edging. And that's how you're going to go ahead and punch it. There is a little raised spot in the center that matches up with a little guide all the way down. But you're going to go ahead and be able to punch snowflakes or whatever border you choose right out of that. And you're going to get a perfect border. So this is roughly the same size and width of the sticker anyway. I'm going to be perfectly happy with that. This particular punch does have some nice punch poop. It has snowflakes. So in case you want to save any of these little snowflakes and use them for additional embellishments on your paper, you can of course do that. I did not do that for this particular layout because I figured it already had enough going on, but certainly you can use any sort of embellishment like that. I am going to probably use some of the gems or pearls that came with the embellishment pack for this particular collection. But that will satisfy my need to put bling on everything, so I'll be good to go. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my 12-inch borders. I found an adhesive spot. All right, so on the left-hand side, This one is going to be applied about 1 inch down from the top. So I'm going to line up my page with the grid design on the cutting mat, and I'm going to use that to measure. And I am finally going to get out my little silicone thing to put the adhesive on the back. Oh, which side do we think we like? I like this side. It matches the colors better. Okay. So I'm going to use repositionable adhesive on the back of this. The beautiful thing about the Repo is that wherever there is a cutout of the design, there won't be any adhesive because it can't stick to anything. It's tiny dots. So that makes it a little easier to, more efficient to go ahead and have your border stick to. There we go. And then just like I did with the penguins on the bottom, I'm going to lift up my border on the side and tuck my snowflakes right under there. And then if you do see any adhesive sparkling through, you can just rub that right off with your finger. And then for the other side, you have two options, because the first option is going to be, it's still going to tuck under this mat, but if you wanted to give the impression of continuing the line over there, you could do that. I actually lifted mine up to the 1/2 inch mark, so it's a little higher on the right-hand side. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to fit all the photo mats for the full-size photos that I knew I was going to put on there. So if you don't know what size photo, how many photos or what size they're going to be yet, and you're just making the page without the photos, listen, that's great. I do it all the time. I find it to be very efficient. Every once in a while, I come to a crop with all of my finished pages, and I spend the weekend just putting photos on the pages that I've already made. So I do catch myself up that way. But I'm going to go ahead and put this about 1/2 inch down from the top. Let me lift up my side here. There we go. And then I'm going to come around to the back and trim this one off, only because this is that piece of paper that doesn't extend all the way across, and I already have adhesive on that. So I'm just going to trim it off and throw it in the trash so that it doesn't end up sticking to things in my bag. Okay. So there it is. That's your base layout. And now there's nothing left but the photo mats and maybe a little additional embellishment. How am I doing for time? Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Okay. So what I did with the photo mats, let me pull this back up so you can see again. These mats and this one are all the same size. They're all 5.5 by 4. So I know I'm going to trim my photos somewhat to fit on there, but that is usually, that size is usually very doable for me. This mat is 3 by 3.5, and this one is 3.5 by 4.5. So a 3 by 4 photo or a 2.5 by 3 photo are going to fit quite nicely here. Or you could potentially use one of these to put a title on your page as well, or line it with another piece of white, and you can do your journaling there as well. And right now I can hear Emily Gallo all the way from Doylestown going, journaling. Who does journaling? Me. I'm the one who journals. There are still some journalers out there. So what I'm going to do is the other piece of polar bear paper has a nice print on the back that I think I'm going to use for mats. So I want to cut this off at 5.5, and I like to open the, you don't necessarily have to on this trimmer, but I do like to open it to be sure I'm exactly at the 5.5 line. Oh, guess what I just did? What I told you not to. Remember that? So let's put the straight blade back in the trimmer. There you go. I told you it was the voice of experience talking. So that being the case, I'm just going to go back to the whole sheet, and I'm going to, now let me think. Yes, I want to cut this at the 5.5 inch mark, and I'll tell you why in a second. The object when you're cutting photo mats is to conserve as much paper as possible. So I want 3 mats cut out of this paper, and at 4 inches, that's gonna work. So if I cut it at 5.5 and then cut that strip into 3 4-inch mats, then I have wasted 0, and I have the exact size that I wanna use. Okay. So I have 3 photo mats that size, and then I'm going to go back to my navy or dark blue shimmer, and I'm going to cut that one at 5.5. And it's just going to squeak it out. Look at that. And then I'll cut this at 4. Okay, so that will make my mats for this size, or this side, sorry. So if we put the dark one up here, then we can have 2 of the pattern paper here. And I'm just centering these widthwise in the strip, and then I'm just gonna move this one down so they're even. And then I have 1 more for over on this side. So now I want to go back to that paper. And I think I can get, let me decide what I'm going to do. I think I'm still going to use this one here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece at 4 inches and then just trim it down to 5.5, and that will make me happy enough that I did the best I could to use up the paper efficiently. I would much rather trim a little bit off my photos and have more photo mats come out of the paper. Paper is expensive. It's one of the consumable products that we use a lot of. So I want to make sure I get the most bang for my buck, right? Now I'm going to go back to my dark blue again. And let's see what I have that I can do from my scraps. I can do this. I know I can. All right, let's see. This is it's going to be no problem at all. Okay, so I want to cut this at 4.5. And then I want to cut it at 3.5. That's the bigger of my 2 shimmer mats. Okay. And then I want to cut this one at 3.5 and 3. So that's the one that could either be the title or the journaling block, but you can position it up here, okay? And there you go. This is awesome because you can arrange this so that you can see igloos, you can see polar bears, you get enough of the pattern paper here to have the idea of what it is. And I really like the way this came out. It's not as boldly colored as the initial paper pack that I did the layout with, but I kind of really like it with the pastels too. It's quite a different look, right? So I'm not gonna spend the time to put the pearls and things like that on it right now. I'll do that off camera. And then I will post the finished layout so that you can see what it looks like. But when we were running up to today, Margie and I were talking, and I was telling her about the wedding album that I made for my son. As you can, this is what I'm talking about. I love big fat albums. But one of the things I talked about is how I use the happy album size or the journal album size inside of a 12 by 12, and I mix the pages in because the little straps are in the same place. So I thought I would spend a few minutes talking about that. They come in the same colors. There's Spargo, there's, I'm not sure if there's black. I think there's white and Spargo and natural at least. And then they also have this style, which is almost like a project lifestyle album where it's really a slip things into the pockets. But I do very much love to, like, I will combine peekaboo pockets with a smaller album page. And this is a way you can get extra photos into the album. But one of the things that I do love to do is this right here, where what I actually did is I printed out an 8x10 photo, and then I trimmed it to fit on the journal album page. So it's actually a really large photo instead of several smaller ones. And this way, with the peekaboo pocket, I was also able to include the full invitation, which was front and back, so that you could see the whole thing. So I just wanted to show you that, because if you haven't tried using any of the journal album size pages in your album, it is an exact fit. It's very easy to do, and it's a really nice way to mix things up. I always do it in a wedding album when I make it, but I have a lot of them in my everyday albums too. You know, when you've made a page, a 2-page spread, and you have just a couple more photos, not enough for another whole 2-page spread, that's a great way to include them. Or how about this one? This is my favorite. I ask my kids for pictures of an event, and they don't send them to me. So I work with what I've got, I make the page, and then they send photos to me 2 months later. And now I have an opportunity to still put that smaller album page in there, so that when it's in between the two 12x12s, it obviously belongs there, but it also doesn't take over. Let me see if I can find another. Oh, here you go. So it's obvious that these pictures belonged with this page, but I really wanted to stick with the layout of the sketch that I was using, so this gave me an opportunity to still include them. And it's a good way to make the most out of your album space without making it feel super crowded. Because if you think about wedding pages, you usually start thinking about what happens at the reception, where you're just trying to cram as many photos as you can onto the pages, because people are doing stuff and it's fun. So using those journal pages earlier in the game is a great way to fit a lot of photos in. All right, well, look for my PDF and the posting of my finished page later on. And thank you so much for spending some time with me. I really look forward to this event every year. I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and it really is fun. It's a nice way to kick off the new year. And if you, like me, like to spend New Year's Eve in your fuzzy slippers, this is a great way to do it. Please, when I post my finished page, post your finished pages in the comments. I would love to see them. One of my favorite things is seeing what other people are doing with a class that I've taught. All right. Thanks so much for joining me, and Happy New Year, everybody.